So another Patreon Q&A. Thank you again, Patreons, so much for your support and for your questions. I would like to thank also Pathset and Flag for donating their commercial collections to the monthly giveaways we have on Discord. So if you are a Patreon, come join us also on Discord for monthly giveaways and a lovely community. If you are not a Patreon, consider joining our community on Patreon. And now let's start with the Q&A. The first question is coming from Jay. I want to do a full performance with VCV where I'd play distinct tracks back to back. To do this within a single patch, I'll need to use the same modules for different sounds. However, manually adjusting numerous parameters and repatching modules can be time consuming when using a keyboard and a mouse. So I was wondering if it's possible to have or to save presets and map buttons that allow instant switching between them, or instead is there a way to transition between different patch files? Trying to find the most CPU friendly option possible. Thanks. Okay, so again we are going back to strip. I think last time or two Q&As ago we spoke about the strip module from Stürmelder that is can do many things, but it can also bypass modules, a series of modules, a row of modules, and by bypassing modules you basically save the CPU, and you can have a huge patch arranged with all sorts of different sections of your live set and just bring them in and out with the strip module. So all you have to do is put the strip module next to the row of modules you want to bypass, and it will bypass everything that is close to it, right? So in this case, all of these modules. And then you can choose here in the right-click menu the on mode if you want it high, low, if you want it to toggle, right? And then you can unbypass and bypass whole rows of modules. Again, they have to be close to one another, so you can see now it will just bypass the VCO and VCA, but if they are all close, it will bypass everything. And let me show you an example. I have here an example patch. Right, I have, for example, two sections of a live set. It's silly, it's not nothing really, just an example. Right, but I have here two sections of a live set, right, that I want to switch between. And I have here the MIDI modules that I can bring them in and out and control them, and you can mute things, you can bring levels in and out according to your live set, and you can also bypass and unbypass. So let's say that I want to start with the first one. I have here my MIDI controller. This is the Nano Control from Korg, right? And I can, with the click of a button, you can see I can bypass and unbypass it, right? The whole section, and now I can start performing this section, right? I just have here the faders mapped, right? There's a sequence, there's bass, right? I can control the bass, right? Let's say this is the first section, and now I'm fading them out because I want to move on to the next section, right? I can, again, with the click of a button, I can bypass them and then unbypass the next section. In this case, there are a few drums and such, and I have here also an individual mixer that I'm using, right? And I can start, right? Start performing this little patch, right? And again, when I'm done with it, I just bypass it and I move on to the next one. And again, by bypassing modules, you basically save the CPU. And again, you can have like this, for example, you can have rows and rows of the different sections, right? And you can use multiple strip modules also and bypass multiple rows at the same time, of course. And like this, during the live play, you just scroll down and you have the new section. Everything is already mapped. You know on your MIDI controller what you have to do. And like this, you can perform your live set by bypassing and unbypassing modules and saving CPU, and you can have a huge patch which will not be such a burden on your computer. One thing, of course, to keep in mind is for the transitioning between them, you might want something that is always on, some sort of sound, just so there is no silence, but this depends on what you do on your live set, on your type of music and so on. But anyway, yes, the strip module from Stürmelder, it's in the library. I hope it helps. The next one is from Neil. What would be some fun things to do with clock dividers? All right, very cool. So first of all, you can use a clock divider as a sub-octave generator. So here I have a sequence, very simple sequence, right? And now I can add sub-octaves to it with a clock divider. So for example, I can take the square wave. Of course, a clock divider will most of the time, if not all of the time, will generate pulse waves or gates, right? Just so you know, but I will use a different, like the square wave to clock the clock divider at audio rates. And then I have here divided by 2, which will be an octave down. Right, and I can add this to the mix, and divided by 4, which will be 2 octaves down. Right? And I have a totally new sound. Right, so you can send your oscillators, your voices before, after effects into clock dividers and get octave downs, sub-octaves, and you can also take or create or generate or use a clock divider to generate sub-harmonics. Right, so I have here more or less the same sequence, just much slower, just so we can listen to the sub-harmonics. Right, and I'm going to take again a square wave to the clock divider, but in this case I'm going to use a different mode of the clock divider. So instead of dividing by 2, 4, 8 and so on, so sub-octaves, I'm going to use prime numbers, so it will be 2, 3, 5, 7, so 3 and 5 are not sub-octaves, but are sub-harmonics. Right, and you might need to tune your oscillator up an octave. Right, so listen to this. This is the original. Right, this is one sub-harmonic. This will be divided by 5. And you get sort of chords divided by 7. Sounds weird, but sub-harmonics can also be interesting. Another thing you can do is generate a pitch sequence. Right, so here I have just an oscillator going through a filter, and I have here an LFO as the clock going through the clock divider. Again, it's set to prime numbers, so we will use divided by 2, divided by 3, divided by 5, and divided by 7. And now it's really important the pulse width of the clock you are using. If it's too short, if it's triggers, it will not work. It needs to be longer. Right, and now we will start, let's take the mix down. We will start mixing them in with the mixer. Right, I'm just mixing the clock divisions. Right, and now bringing in the whole mix, going through a quantizer. And this creates a sequence because they are going up and down in voltage. Sometimes 2 or 3 will be up at the same time, creating even more voltage. Sometimes less. Voltage changes can also create pitch changes, right? Right, and like this you can create also a sequence, a pitch sequence from a clock divider, which can be also quite interesting. Again, depending on the divisions you use. And the last thing I want to show you is, it's the last thing, yeah. The last thing I want to show you is splitting a sequence. I have here a 16-step sequence with a few gates open, right? Triggering a kick drum, and the same sequence is going through a clock divider. Just because it's called clock divider doesn't mean it has to divide only clocks. You can divide also sequences. So here again, it's set to prime numbers, so 2, 3, 5, 7, and so on. So the divided by 2 will trigger a closed hat, going through some delay. Divided by 3 will trigger a snare drum. Divided by 5 will trigger a clap. Right, and all of this from one sequence. I'm not dividing the clock, I'm dividing the actual gate sequence, right? And then sort of splitting it to multiple different voices, multiple different drum voices, which can also be quite interesting. Okay, the next question is from Chris. Hi, Omri. How do you see the future of sound designing with AI? Do you see it as a bless or a curse? For example, bless, more creativity, curse, less originality. All right, so I have two or three maybe things to say about this. So first of all, I think that the most important thing, and this is already the answer, I guess, but in my opinion, as a listener or for the listeners, the most important thing is the music or the sounds, right? This is the most important. No one cares how you made things. No one cares if you used AI or if you used samples or presets. And anyway, what is the difference? For example, imagine someone is sitting down at his computer or her computer, and they are trying to produce music, and they go into Splice and they download multiple samples, and they just use the samples as it is, as they are, and that's it. And they just use samples. For you as a producer or as a composer, you look at it and say, they didn't really do anything. They didn't. Well, who cares? It's all about the music, right? It's all about the sound. Who cares how you do something? If it's AI, or if it's samples, or if it's presets or whatever. Right. On the other hand, as a composer or as a producer, I think, in my opinion, it's important also to have fun. If you are not having fun, then what's the purpose of this? And if you go and you use AI and you enjoy it, and it helps the music, and the purpose of it is for the music, for the sounds, for the result, and then I think go for it. And also, again, what is the difference between someone who's using AI, and this will be my next point, what is AI anyway, but someone who's using AI, or someone who's using samples, samples, I mean that they didn't record or anything, I mean samples, downloaded samples and use them. And what is the difference between someone who's using just presets? I mean, yeah, they have thousands of VSTs, but all they use is just presets. What's the difference? And what's the difference between me sitting down and creating a so-called generative patch that is just playing by itself and creating the sounds for me? What did I do? I just patched a few things and I don't do anything, and the music is being created for me. So for me, the most important thing is the music. If it serves the music, if you sit down and you find inspiration and you have fun using AI, go for it. It's great. It's another tool for you to use. I don't see it as a curse, not in this type of thing at least. And my next point is, what is AI? Everyone is speaking about AI. This is AI this, AI that. What does it even mean? I mean, I understand, I speak about sound design and music production and stuff like this. In my opinion, I think, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe most of it is not even AI. It's just algorithms that are, you put something in them and they spit something out. I don't know. I have some experience with something that might be out in the future. I don't know how much I can say about it, but basically you feed it a sample, and it gives you different variations of these sample according to AI. And I mean, when I think about this, first of all, it can be totally fun. You go and you look for different samples that you want to feed it and see what it will give you back. And maybe you will get inspiration out of it. And maybe you'll say, wow, this is so cool, I want to use it. Or, hey, you know what? I don't want to use it, but it gave me an idea to create something similar. I think it's another tool in our toolbox, I guess, if you want to look at it like this. But again, I'm not so sure. Everyone is speaking about AI. And when I say, I mean AI in music, in stuff like this. Everyone is speaking about AI and stuff like this. And I'm not so sure how much of it is really artificial intelligence and how much of it is just an algorithm that is just doing something. When you feed it something and it spits something out. Yeah, so I'm not so sure if it's even, if many of these things are anyway AI, and if it is, and it's fun, and you enjoy it, and it gives you inspiration, go for it. And if it serves the music you are creating, and as a listener, no one cares what you are using. No one cares. I saw once like a sort of an interview or workshop or whatever with infected mushroom. And they said that they are using samples for the, now, I mean, back then they used to synthesize everything, but they understood that no one cares and it just takes a long time. So they just use samples. They use samples for kicks. They use samples for other stuff. Yes, they of course manipulate things. No pun intended. Manipulate on stuff. Never mind. But yeah, they use samples, and why not? If it serves the music, if it serves the goal, and if you enjoy it, and if it gives you inspiration, then go for it. And what's the difference between just using samples and between using so-called AI or whatever? So anyway, I don't see this as a curse. I see this as another tool. It can be exciting. I'm not so much into it, but this is just my how I feel about this stuff. But I think it can be great. I don't know if it can give you inspiration, if it serves the goal, which is the music and the sounds. Depends what you do. If it's sound design for movies, or if it's music for your own releases, or for online news and stuff like this. So I say go for it. The next one is from Marcus. Lately, I have been more and more interested in FM synthesis and FM sounds. Any suggestions for modules and patches to make cool FM sounds? So this is definitely a subject for a whole video or a few videos even. But I really recommend checking out the recently released, maybe, or not so recently anymore, but the FM modules from Surge, the FM2 and the FM3 VCOs. They sound great and they have interesting features. Also in the right-click menu, never skip them with the drift and all of the other stuff. Right, so definitely check them out. I have here a few examples. So here, this is the FM2, and I have an envelope. This is a polyphonic patch. I have an envelope modulating a few things, making it plucky and percussive. I think FM is really nice for percussive sounds. Also pads and stuff, but also really percussive sounds. And there is also some modulation, right? And I can play it with my keyboard. Lots of movement, there is detuning here. Right, I don't know, it's a really fun patch with just one VCO also, so imagine what you can do with 2 or 3. And the VCO, the FM3 is really fun also for all sorts of weird sounds because it has another oscillator. It has 3 oscillators basically, or 3 operators I should say. Right, so again, here there's a sequence, lots of modulation. Right, so you can create all sorts of different moving sounds. Of course, there are many other modules in VCV that are great, like Tremor FM from Volt and Opulus from Volt, Kitchen Sink, which is a sort of a take on the FM operator, Dexter, which is amazing for chords and stuff like this, although it's not fully an FM synth, because the operators don't have their own envelopes, but this you can do externally, never mind. And Dark Energy, which is a pretty new release from the Geodesics, which is the second version of Energy, and in this case it's not just a ring modulation, it's also a frequency modulation, which can also be quite interesting. And of course the FM operator, if you want to build your own algorithms and FM synths and stuff like this, I really recommend the FM op. It's great also for bell-like sounds. So here, for example, I have 2 layers, right? 2 layers of 2 operators in each layer, and they are detuned to inharmonic relationships, whatever, which means that basically they will sound more metallic and bell-like. Listen to this sound. Right, and just by changing a bit the frequency, you get a totally different result. Right, really bell-like sound. which is really fun. But again, have a look at the FM2, FM3 form search. The next one is from Dave. Hi Dave, I have a question that I'm sure you have already answered before, but I can't find it on YouTube. I want to find a way to have my Sec3 sequence start playing from the first note, but it always starts playing from the second note. So we spoke a bit and you told me that you are using clocked, and with clocked from impromptu it doesn't work directly. So let me show the issue first of all to everyone else. So here I have the Sec3, right? And I have just the first note programmed, which means that only on the first note we will hear a note. And now if I start, right, I reset the sequence so it's on step 1, and now when I hit run, it will start on step 2 actually. Have a listen. Right, we didn't hear anything because it starts on step 2. Again, reset, run. Right, it starts on step 2. Let me show you this also with another sequencer with the ADDR. Let me switch them here. Right, also here in this case, I'm using the ADDR as a gate sequencer. So now when I hit reset, we will hear a note because it will jump to step 1. But when I hit run, you will see we will hear nothing, even though we want it to start on step 1, because it will start on step 2. Right, again, reset, we will hear a note. But now when I hit run, we will hear nothing. Right, so the solution for this, and let me know if it works for you, in the right-click menu of clocked, there is the setting on start, and here you have to activate do internal research and send reset pulse. This means that every time you hit run, the clock will reset itself and will also send out a reset to the sequencer. So the sequencer will reset itself and will start on step 1. Now you don't have to hit reset anymore. You just have to hit run because the run now will reset everything anyway. So now have a listen, I will hit run and you will see that we get the first note. Right? Again, it will start now on the first note. Right, let's have a look now at the Sec3. Again, I will switch them. Now it's on step 3. Again, you don't have to hit reset, you just have to hit run. And we get the first note. So the sequencer will start playing on the first note. Again, activate, do internal reset and send reset pulse. Let me know if it works for you. The next question is from Mateusz. Hi. My question may seem a bit confusing, but I often wonder, where do you get ideas for your projects in VCVRAC? I'm not talking about materials posted on Patreon here. What's your modus operandi? Personally, I love watching your videos on YouTube. Thank you so much. And over the years, I've had the opportunity to learn a lot from you, and I use your tricks quite often in my patches myself. Thank you, Mateusz. Well, there is no one answer here, I guess. Many times I will see something on YouTube or whatever, a video or something. It doesn't have to be about VCVRAC, doesn't have to be about modular at all. Sometimes it's like sound design with Vital, or how to make, I don't know what, techno in Ableton or stuff like this. And all of a sudden there's like a little trick that they are doing that I think to myself, wow, I have to see how I can do this in the modular environment, if it's VCV or hardware. Sometimes it just gives me an idea to build like a small setup, crossfade, I don't know, it's just all sorts of different ideas that I get from different places that are not necessarily modular. Sometimes it doesn't have to be even from the music world. Yeah, so many times it's from videos that I'm just, or information, let's say, that I get somewhere else, and I just have to explore this in the modular environment. Yes, sometimes is when there is a new module released, if it's VCVRAC or hardware, and yeah, just by exploring it, you get like techniques that then you take, or tip or whatever, ideas that then you take and you try to use with other modules and other setups, and just take it to a different place. So this is also something really interesting. Sometimes for manuals, when you have a look at manuals, many times, by the way, I get new ideas and stuff from the Q&As. So you guys will ask me stuff and I will do research and I will stumble upon all sorts of different things and learn from it. This is great. I'm always trying, I don't know, it sounds a bit stupid, but I'm always trying to learn something new. So I always research things. I will sit down and with a module, if it's a sample and hold, a new sample and hold module got released, And maybe it will give me a new idea of how to use sample and hold and stuff like this. Yeah, so it's just, I don't know, just many hours of using VCVREC and using hardware and just being into this whole different environments and stuff like this, I guess. Yeah, but many ideas are from the Q&A, and I have a whole list on Google Docs with video ideas and things I want to explore. Some things I already explored and I want to record a video about, and some things I want to explore, some synthesizers I want to build, sound design ideas I want to explore, and all sorts of different things. Yeah, so yeah, from everywhere basically. Cheers, Mateusz. So the next question is from, I guess it's mistake number 2. One thing I've noticed is that you like distortion effects quite a bit, indeed, and I'd like to make more effective use of them. However, a lot of time I have considerable trouble identifying exactly what these effects do to the sound, and I'm therefore having trouble determining what the cases are when I should use distortion and when it is either unwelcome or redundant. I know about the whole clipping saturation thing, but it seems like every time I try these, I end up replacing them with a wave folder. Any wisdom is welcome. So first of all, a wave folder is also a type of distortion, I guess. I don't know, maybe someone in the comments can help us with this, but I think wave folding is also a type of distortion, which is great. So if you like wave folding, perfect. But there is something with distortion. There is with distortion it is like distortion effect, let's call it. There is something to keep in mind, and that you need to feed it a bit more than what you feed a wave folder. So it needs more flesh to chew on, if you will. Right, so here, for example, I have a simple sequence. Right, now if I feed this directly to a distortion effect, we will not get so much interesting things because there is not so much for the distortion to work with. Opalach. So if I have here I have the distortion from Surge, which is great, I love it. Right, I'm adding a bit drive and feedback, but it's not really interesting. I mean, yes, it's changing the sound, but again, in this case, I would also use a wave folder to create something a bit more interesting. Right, so if you have something like this, just one note playing, I would not use distortion, but, and this is something I love doing, is feeding the distortion more information, more information to work with, to actually process. So something I like doing is using effects before the distortion, if it's delay and reverb, so time-based effects, to give a bit more meat to the sound for the distortion to work with. So here I have more or less the same sequence, or also a simple sequence. Right, and again I have here a distortion that will not do so much by itself, but if, for example, I start adding a delay, and again this is before the distortion, listen now. Right? And distortion, I love using distortion as a sort of a way to create more intensity and less intensity, to create variation in intensity, basically, in a sort of velocity, if you want, or more intensity of the track, of the music. I love using distortion as going like up and down, up and down. Right, so have a listen now with reverb. Oh yeah. Right, you get much more variation in the sound, it's much more presence, or it's much more present. Right, so this is an idea of using distortion after effects. And also when you think about this, for example, as a guitar effect, when you play guitar and you have distortion, if you play just one note, you will not get so much from the distortion, right? Right, but when you start playing chords into distortion, again, more information, more things for the distortion to process. Listen to this. Oh man. Don't forget also when you play guitar and you play just one note, the other notes are also vibrating and resonating, so there is more information already. But try to play just one note if you are playing guitar. If you have a friend who is playing a guitar, just one note, we're muting all the other notes, just one note into the distortion. You will see you will not get so much out of it. But when you start playing chords, power chords, stuff like this, right, you start getting the intensity of the distortion. So again, try experimenting with effects before distortion, try experimenting with chords into distortion, and try and use distortion more as a compositional tool rather as a sound design tool like wavefolding. So wavefolding, of course, you can use both in any way, but wavefolding you can use really as a sound design tool, creating a sound you like, and distortion you can use more as a compositional tool, creating intensity, creating changes in energy in the track and so on. Have fun. The next one is from Pattern Music. I'm looking for a way to randomize the length of a sequence. I've tried to set a time pulse to reset a sequencer with a 50% probability, but it only results in one of two different lengths, full length or the duration of the random reset pulse. What I would like is for the reset pulse to be triggered at some random interval between 1 and 16. I know this should be easy, but I think because I need the probability in the time domain, it is evading me. So there are a few things you can do in VCVRack, and there is something you can try also in hardware. So in VCVRack, first of all, there are many sequencers that have also a CV input for the length, right? Like the SEC3 has a CV input with attenuator, the 8sec from JW, Bordel from Bido has also steps and a CV input, right? So this you can also try. If you are using a sequencer that doesn't have a CV input, you can use micromap and just map the steps, right? And then modulate them randomly so you can get random lengths. But also, if you do this also in hardware, yes, you can use the reset input. I'm not so sure what you did there with the timer to randomize it. I'm not so sure what you meant, but there are modules like the Bernoulli gate or branches for mutable instruments that is probably not available anymore, but there are clones of it. For example, Flip from After Later Audio. I know there are more. Or you can just use sample and hold. You clock the sample and hold and you use it as a reset. Or if you have something like a comparator, you can send the sample and hold through a comparator, and then with the threshold, you can choose the sort of the probability where the sample and hold is, and then you send this to the reset, and you get many more variations than just full length and the reset. For example, here I have a 16-step sequencer, and you can see now it was started at 3, now 4, now 4 again, now 2. Right, and it all depends on the probability. Now a length of 5. If I change the probability here, right, we get here 6, 7, 8 steps. Now 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 steps, right? So there is difference. You get sometimes 5, sometimes 9, sometimes 16 maybe, sometimes 11 steps, depending on the probability you set. Again, if you're using VCVRack, it's much easier because you can use multiple chances modules or branches modules and do this. If it's hardware, it's a bit more tricky. But again, using the reset input is the option, I guess. I'm not so sure, again, what you meant with, how did you call it? Try to a timed pulse to reset the sequencer with a 50% probability. So if you do this in hardware, I'm not so sure what module you use, but if you do this in VCVRack, so really have a look at the chances module. You can also chain them to get even less variation, or if you want more variation, and trigger the reset, and by this you can get different lengths, basically a randomized length for your sequences. So we have two similar questions, but I will start with locked in, I guess, with the second part here. Also, I'm curious as whether you use the BeatStep Pro anymore. I'm looking for a hardware sequencer to control VCVRack quickly and easily. Would be curious to know your thoughts. So now I'm not using the BeatStep Pro anymore with VCVRack. Actually, I'm not using any sequencer with VCVRack. There are so many amazing sequencers in VCVRack that you can sequence and create things really easily and on the fly. And also this whole MIDI thing, MIDI clock and latency and stuff like this, I found myself troubleshooting and trying to fix latency and stuff like this more than making music. So I sort of stopped using hardware sequencers. I'm using MIDI controllers. I have a keyboard. I have faders and knobs and stuff like this. But there are so many cool sequencers in VCVREC that I can also map if I want. That I'm not using the BeatStep Pro with VCVREC anymore. I really recommend having a good MIDI controller and instead of a sequencer. But if your setup is a bit more stable than mine, and maybe your clock, MIDI clock and stuff like this will work better for you. So again, now there are two questions that are more or less the same. So the first one is, it would be great to know how to make some deep groaning synth voices that are gritty as fudge, but also fairly clean, like that of Kennigan Rain, Amber Decay, and or Gum Takes Tooth in the lead track Armistice of the new album. Mine always end up so muddy. And another question that is related from Federico. I recently watched John Wick 4, and now I'm obsessed with Le Castlevania's music, especially A Long Way Down. Do you have advice on how to make similar huge and powerful sounds, especially the bass? Everything I make sounds so boring in comparison. So there are two videos that I made already. I will put a link in the description. One is creating a cinematic lead sound or bass sound or monster sound, I called it. And the other one is creating a bass sound, a huge bass sound with crooning from Instruo. So in those two videos, I show how to create a really gnarly sound that I will show you also in a second. So this is an example for the first one. Right, so this is the first one that can be quite cool, and then the second one with crewing is also quite fun. Oh yeah. So go look at the videos again, link in the description, and of course the patches are also available there to download, and you can create all sorts of different variation of bass sound, lead sounds, lots of distortion, feedback, stuff like this, really fun. Fun. The next one is from Gavri. Hi, I have a question. Is there any similar modules or a combination of modules that I can use in VCVREC to recreate the experience of the qubit data banter? I'm not looking for the exact experience, but more the concept that behind it, like a sonic canvas capable of infinite surprises and discovery that is inspired by the ways in which audio equipment can fail. So I built something. This is definitely on my list to make it more, not complex, but deeper. I want to build something very similar to the data bender in VCVREC, but here I started something that can be fun. So I have here a drum loop. You can feed it anything. Of course, I will put a link in the description where you can download the patch. I will put just the effects. Of course, you don't need the drums. It's really simple, but you can feed it anything. Right, and here I have a sort of a glitch setup. Maybe I can make this a bit louder. Nah, never mind. So here I have here a sort of a glitch setup with a delay, modulated delay, right, that I can bring in the mix. I have here, by the way, this is the, now I forgot how it's called, the patch master for MindMeld. Just so you have more control easily, you just have to look at this and you can control things. So I can bring in the repeats, so the stuttering. Right, something like this. I can add also beat crashing. And folding, wave folding. Right, something like this. And there is also the sort of bend section there that will record to a buffer and will play it back in reverse, an octave down, 2 octaves down, so on, an octave up. So for this I'm using simpliciter. Again, I just have to bring in the mix. Right. So you can use this also to create all sorts of glitchy, weird sounds. So again, with the delay, the Briatus for crash and fold, and simpliciter for this buffer recording sort of thing. Yeah, so this is more or less it. Again, there is a link in the description. I will put this on Patreon where you can download this. The next one is from Nick. I know you say you're not typically that great at replicating sound design from other music. I'm definitely not great at this. But nonetheless, I'm curious to see how you'd approach achieving something similar to the glitchy drum sounds and rhythms in the track Silica by Objekt. Broadly speaking, it sounds like some sort of granular sample splicer to me, but I think there might some sort of fast delay effects as well. The rhythm has a fun rubato push and pull feel that would be interesting to try and work out in the modular environment. So again, definitely I'm not going to try and replicate this. I saw an interview with him, or a few interviews, where he speaks also about Silica. It's full of field recordings. So sound design there is really tricky because there are all sorts of different sounds that he recorded there. And he said also that in this track and in this whole album, he worked a lot with clock modulation. So he modulated the clock of the BPM basically of the whole track. This is this push and pull effect that you hear. So this is more or less it, but I'm going to give you a few ideas that you can try in your own patches. So first of all, using LFOs for stretching sounds, right? So here I have, and you can record this and use this as a sound design sort of thing. Here I have an LFO triggering a rim shot, right? And when you start modulating the LFO, right, you get this sort of weird sound that you can you can then record, pan, add effects, work on it a bit more, and so on, just by modulating the rate of triggering it. Another thing you can try is modulating the clock. Again, this is what, is there another one? Yeah, modulating the clock. This is something that he spoke about specifically about this track, but I'm sure that he did this in his whole album. Modulating the BPM basically, so you don't know where the beat is, right? You just modulate the clock. It's going up and down, in and out, back and forth. And right, so basically in the modular environment, if I hit run here, I have here a kick and a clap. Right, the LFO is my clock. I'm going to use this to clock a CV sequencer, and I'm going to use this CV sequencer to control the rate or the frequency of this clock, basically modulating the BPM. Right, so now I can make this a bit slower at times, a bit quicker. Right? Right, and of course you can do this also with a random signal, right? And then there is another trick that I showed also before, which is creating these glitchy sounds with a delay. So you don't really need anything granular if you don't have it or something, but you can use a delay. Delay is basically a repeater. It will repeat what you feed into it, right? So you can use a delay to create those glitchy bit repeat type of sounds. Here I have just drums, right? And I'm using the Chronoblock 2. I have here a gate that when I hit it, when I hold it, it will bring in the delay through the dry wet CV input. It will freeze the delay and it will modulate there is always modulation on the delay time, so it will sound like this. Right, and you can have it with pitch changes or without if you switch this switch here. Right, I can make the modulation a bit quicker. With pitch changes. Right, so you can create all sorts of different glitchy sounds. Also with the delay, Chronoblob 2 is great for this, but you can use any other delay. So again, try modulating the BPM, try creating this glitchy type of sounds with the delay, and use lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of sounds from around you. If you listen, you can hear all sorts of different drilling sounds and all sorts of things that he recorded. Yeah, so have fun. The next question is from Harry. I've seen lots of interesting videos about the new physical moduling plugin Objekt, another object, by Reason Studios. It has a load of options to customize the exciter, mimicking things like felt hammers and bows and things, and then also up to 3 resonating bodies whose resonant frequencies you can tune. I guess they have a load of complex preset algorithms, but it'd be really interesting to see what tools we have in VCV to do this kind of complex physical modeling. So in VCV, basically the best option is the modal synthesizer from Audible Instruments, or I forgot how it's called, the hardware one from Mutable Instruments, which is basically not available anymore, but there are tons of clones out there if you are interested in hardware also. And this is a physical modeling module, basically. So you see we have volt per octave and gate. You can play it. You have mallet to strike the exciter. So on the left you have the exciter, on the right you have the resonator. So to excite the resonator, basically, you can change it. I like taking it all the way to the right, and then as long as you hold the gate, you'll have all sorts of different hits, right? And then you can change the timbre, the geometry of the resonator, damping, more decay, less decay, even add some sort of reverb. Right, so you have strike, you have then blow, which is like a stream of air. Right, and you have bow, which is like bowing a violin, for example. And of course you can combine all three. I don't really like the sound of it. I think I saw a few videos about Objekt, and I think it sounds amazing. Right, but I think this is the best option we have for now in VCV Rack. Of course, you can also process external sounds, like here, for example, I have a drum loop. Right, so you can basically process also external sounds. And don't forget to check out also Elastica from Sapphire, which is it's totally different, but it's also more or less in the same direction, which is also quite interesting. Right, can also give you lots of metallic-like sounds. Yeah, so I hope you will enjoy them. The next question is from the Lark Mage. Wanted to ask a quick question about sample clearing. Seeing as DistroKid doesn't provide any support with sample clearing, my solution has just been to only sample for my own recordings or to sample from something like Freesound, where you can find a plethora of public domain and Creative Commons attribution sounds. Are there any other specific resources you frequently use for finding useful samples to work with for free? And for any samples you have gotten permission to use, what was the process like to get the samples cleared as an independent artist? So first of all, no, I never cleared any sample. I usually, for my music, I don't use any samples that I know either that they are completely Creative Commons and stuff like this, which I also don't really use, or that I didn't create or recorded by myself. So usually I will not use samples that I have to clear or anything like this, just because I don't feel like, there are so many samples out there and so many sounds that I can use that are around me. I just don't want to deal with all of this stuff. That said, there is a website. I will put a link. I forgot how it's called, something lib or lib. I will put a link in the description where you can get, it's less for samples, it's more for tracks, that you can sample different tracks and get them cleared and all really easily and stuff like this. I saw this in a video from Andrew Wang once, where he used it and stuff like this. So it's supposed to be really easy to clear, but it's less samples. It's more, you can sample tracks, like songs if you want, which is also cool if you want to do this and get permission and everything. But usually I will not use samples that I didn't record, or I know, like something from Freesound, for example. In the previous question, you heard like a drum loop that I used. So I used to, years and years ago, I used to be subscribed to Computer Magazine, was it? Computer Music Magazine, yeah. And every month you got like a CD-ROM with lots and lots of samples that you can use, that are free. You are subscribed to the paper, so you can use them. And yeah, and I saved them since then. It's like 15, 20 years ago, I don't know. And I still have them and I still use them, and they are great. They are great quality. There are lots of different sounds there, not just drums. So sometimes I will use this, but not in my music. Mostly, I think in videos, like, stuff like this, where I need samples just so I don't have to create everything from scratch. So I never cleared any samples. I have no idea what the process is. I really don't want to deal with this. There are enough sounds out there that I can use. Freesound is great. And have a look in the description to this website if you want to sample like tracks and songs and stuff like this to work with. So the last question is coming from Kayetan, I guess. Lately I watched Andrew Wang video about tips for generative ambient patching, and I came up with an idea that I don't know how to realize. Let's say that we have a chord progression, and based on this harmony we have a burst of notes. So I guess you're speaking about arpeggiator, which might also have decay length based on tempo of the burst, the faster, the shorter, and the slower, the longer. Now comes the part which is not so simple for me. Let's say that the burst starts in even distances, and the burst must start with the bass, so the lowest note given by the chord progression, but the rest of the notes are in random order. Thanks in advance. And congrats on releasing modules with path set and flag. I really love them and use them in almost every patch. Perfect. Thank you so much. It was a fun experience. Okay, so let me show you more or less what I did here. Again, I will put this patch on the Patreon post so you can have a look. Okay, so first of all, for the burst of random notes with the harmony, so I have the note sequencer generating chords, and I have a burst generator that will first of all scan through the chords, but also will scan through the notes with the help of an arpeggiator. So the arpeggiator will play one note after the other. In this case, I have it set to random, so it will play the notes randomly. But you said you want the bass first of all, and then the rest of the notes. So in VCVREC, what we do, I hope you speak about VCVREC and not hardware. I'm not so sure how to do this in hardware with chords and stuff like this. It can get quite complex. But in VCVREC, we are going to split the polyphonic signal. So I'm going to take the polyphonic chords, once the pitch and once the gates, right? And I'm going to split them. So first of all, what I will do, I will take the first note, right? And this will be the lowest note. The first channel will always be, in this case, the lowest note, which is the bass. And I'm going to send this to a dedicated bass module that I have here, or a voice, right? An FM operator that is tuned an octave down. This will be the bass, right? I'm taking the volt per octave and I'm taking the gates from the first channel. Now I'm going to merge all the other notes, right? So from voice 2 and on, I'm going to merge them with the merge module. So we have 7 notes here, right? We have the bass, which is 1, and then 7 more, which is the other notes of the chord, right? And I'm going to merge them and send them into the arpeggiator. Now for the clock, I'm using here a random clock, an LFO modulated by a sample and hold, right? And I'm going to use this clock to clock the arpeggiator, right? So it will run with this clock. Or actually, you know what I will do? I'm using this LFO actually to clock the burst generator, and the burst generator will clock the arpeggiator. So we just get a burst of notes, right? But now there's a different issue, because now when I start it, you will hear the bass and the notes playing together. So you hear the bass and the first note, right, playing together. Right, so what we need to do is to create a sort of a delay from the bass. So the bass will start first, and then the notes will start later. So I'm going to delay this clock that I'm using to arpeggiate with the delay module. This is the CV delay module from Borg Audio, and it will delay it by 0.5 seconds. You can experiment with this, right, and see what you want. But now what will happen when I start the burst, we will hear the bass voice, and then the next 7 notes playing in a random order, right? Once again. Right? So you have the bass voice, which will be the lowest note, and then you will get the rest of the notes. Again, I will put this on Patreon if you want to have a closer look. Basically, you split them just so you can grab the lowest note, and then you merge them again into an arpeggiator that will arpeggiate the notes randomly and will play them in a random sequence. And that was it. Thank you again, Patreons, for your support. Thank you for your questions. Thank you, PathSet and Flag, for donating your collections, your commercial collections, to the monthly giveaways on Discord. Again, if you are a Patreon, come join us on Discord. If you are not a Patreon, consider joining us on Patreon. Monthly Q&As, lots and lots of extra content, presets, additional videos, occasional live streams, and a Discord channel with a lovely community and challenges and giveaways and stuff. Really cool. Thank you for watching. Cheers.